Our guest this episode is Joe Federbush, president of EVOLIO Marketing. With a deep background in face-to-face and event marketing, he has helped businesses maximize their impact through data-driven strategies and meaningful engagement. His expertise spans market research, measurement, analytics, and event marketing strategy, making him a go-to resource for companies looking to enhance their trade show and event performance. With a career built on strategy, business development, and storytelling, Joe combines marketing expertise with a strong analytical approach to drive real results. Here to discuss how businesses can measure and improve their event marketing success, please welcome to the podcast, Joe Federbush. Joe, welcome.
Welcome to the Engaging Personalities Podcast. I'm Anders Belanger, founder and CEO of Engagify, where we're on a mission to rehumanize business through engagement. We believe that we can all be more successful if we can command attention and deepen connection. So stick around to the end of the show and we'll reveal how you can be our next guest on a future episode. So let's get ready to engage.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Anders. Great to be here.
Yeah, and we met at Exhibitor Live. We were kind of talking, pre-recording, talking a little bit about, where we met and everything. And you've been, part of Exhibitor Live for quite some time. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was really the foundation of getting involved in the event industry a long, long time ago. And it was a crucial part of me understanding the ins and outs and, what makes sense and help me try to make sense of the things that didn't make sense.
I was in one session with you. It was Liz Lathan's session, and everyone was referring to you as the measurement guy, right? Like what? But it's true, data and measurement and everything. So before we get into what you do and how you help companies, can you kind of just give us a little bit of a history? How did you? Because you know what, in trade shows, in my experience, no one really sets out to do it. They end up kind of being there, but maybe you have a different story. I don't know. What's your background and how did you get into trade show?
Oh yeah. You want to talk about falling into it? I am guilty. So this is actually pretty crazy. Many years ago, about over 30 years ago, I lived next door to one of the most iconic measurement companies around. It was called Exhibit Surveys. So if anyone, people who've been in the industry a while, they know Exhibit Surveys, the measurement company back in the day. So I literally lived next door to Exhibit Surveys, and I was in high school. I needed a summer job. They were next door. I just knocked on the door. Hey, are you guys hiring for anything? They said, yeah, we need someone in the mailroom, because this was pre-internet. That's how old I am. Stuffing envelopes, literally stuffing surveys into envelopes in the mailroom. And I was just always intrigued at what the company did. And I was in the mailroom, so I would read the research reports that they were literally mailing hard copies to clients back in the day. And I just kind of took it on a little bit more, learning a little bit more, then got involved in the business. And literally when they say, started in the mailroom and worked your way up, I literally did that. So learned every facet of, event measurement, market research from, the leaders in the industry. And then about 8 years ago, started EVOLIO after working at Exhibit Surveys for over 25 years.
Wow. Okay. So, you've put in your time.
Yeah.
You got your 10,000 plus hours, doing this. I love the fact that the mailroom story is true, because I always joke when I'm working in a booth for a company, they always wonder if I'm actually with the company, right? Because I'm doing the performance and everything like that. And I always joke, yeah, they found me in the mailroom, and then I could do all these things, right? So that's actually true with you. So you've really lived and breathed, trade show measurement for your whole adult life, really.
Exactly. Yeah. Really every facet of it, from, the data entry side all the way to, the whole strategy and everything in between, literally started at the bottom of market research.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's and was there something about that attracted you? Are you a numbers guy inherently? Because some people would go, oh man, this sounds boring. I wouldn't,
Yeah,
not for
totally.
everyone.
Yeah. I'm both left brain, right brain. I wouldn't say I'm the most creative person in the world, but I'm definitely a numbers guy without a doubt. I love data, I love math. And then when I went to college and took the stats classes, I was like, oh, I really love this because I knew the practical side of it versus just the book side because I'd been doing it already at that
Yeah.
point. So yeah, I really did fall in love with it. And I have to say, traveling when you're 20 years old with a corporate card and getting to go to Vegas and Europe, and who says no to that?
Yeah, that can be quite attractive for sure. You get
Yeah.
some nice destination, visits in. Let's change gears, Joe. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, what is measurement trade show success look like? Because I think when I talk with a lot of clients, the measurement will be, well, leads, right? And then
Yeah.
they'll look at, it's basically the lead scanner, and then once they get into their CRM, they're seeing what kind of pipeline and what have you. So, maybe
Right.
they count meetings and stuff like that. What are the kind of metrics that you're measuring that gives people much more of a holistic view of how they're doing when they exhibit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to your point, the badge scans, the pipeline, the CRM, the ROI, those are all extremely important metrics and KPIs. But we look at that as the end result, not the beginning. So what we like to do is think of reverse engineering the whole process to measure every aspect along the way. If you think about the visitor journey or the attendee journey, it starts off with are you marketing pre-show? Are you marketing to the right people with the right message, with the right call to action to come visit you or attend? If you do, hopefully, then are you selectively attracting your key targets? Not just everybody at the show, but the people that represent your key target audience. That's the first step, the successful attraction of the right people versus, hey, we're giving away stuff and let me just scan your badge. That's like it's a tactic, but is it effective? Then obviously once you get the right people, is your staff engaging with them? Are they saying and are they asking the right questions, saying the right things so that they're educating and informing, which gets to the next step is enhancing the brand, building brand awareness, the whole marketing objective side of things. You do those four steps well, then hopefully your leads, your CRM, your pipeline, and your ROI are going to be successful. So rather than starting at ROI, we look at that's like the outcome of everything else you've done.
Right. And you had mentioned just now, just measuring the engagement level of the booth staff.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that? Like, do you have people just kind of sitting back, observing and watching, and like, how do you count that? What's the measurement of the KPI on that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's a few, depending on, of course, the objective of what about the staff. There's so many great tools out there that measure, like, the tracking, the heat mapping, behavioral analysis, all that kind of stuff. And of course, we analyze that data. But yeah, that's kind of good. You can obviously look at your booth and see where it's busy, where it's not, and are your staff engaging, are they not? We do a lot of that through a very methodical way of mystery shopping. So to your point, Anders, yeah, we could
Ah,
stand there or have people
okay.
mystery shop, even wear attendee badges and see and ask questions and see what they're saying. And are they approaching me? And are they engaging me? Are they just spewing out product information or are they qualifying me?
Yeah.
So that's the qualitative side of measuring staff performance. And then the quantitative side, which is really effective, is doing exit surveys to the guests at your exhibit or event or experience, and then asking them, a series of the most appropriate, succinct questions. Did
Mm,
you engage with booth staff? If yes, how effective were they? How knowledgeable were they? Were they paying attention? Were they available to answer your questions? Did they seem like they understand, or
right.
did they seem like they were interested in your needs versus just telling you about their business? So there's two ways to, the qualitative and quantitative way to analyze booth staff performance.
Right. And I mean, in both cases, those are boots on the ground personnel that you have put in place
Yeah.
to then observe, right?
Yeah.
Observe or survey. Yeah. That's interesting because I love that secret shopper thing. And I don't know, are you involved in the exhibitor live, judging of booths at all? Is that something that you help out with, or is that on their own?
I have in the past, but
Okay.
years ago I have for sure.
Yeah.
Recently, not so much because
Okay.
doing too many sessions.
Yeah. Oh, that you were either presenting at or going
Yeah,
to perhaps.
yeah.
one of the things that I found that at Exhibitor Live, just for me, is like if someone comes in and they're a little too interested, it's like, oh, you're the judge, like
Yeah, right.
because they have to come and stop and ask questions, right? So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's neither here nor there. But so yeah, so now we are talking a little bit about the brand awareness side of things too, right?
Hmm.
And that to me sounds a little bit, exit surveys could be part of that as well or something. And I think brand awareness is a harder thing to measure, and it's nice that you have, that's part of your offering
Yeah.
because man, when ROI and brand awareness are two completely different things in a
Oh yeah.
sense that, we get, and I'm sure you've talked to these companies too, that I just came back from RSA like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The popcorn sponsorship was $60,000 this year, up from $40,000 a number of years ago. But it's like,
Right.
so you're paying 60 grand to give away
Hmm.
popcorn with a dime-sized logo of your company on the bag, right? Like
Hmm.
so there's not a great ROI, play that. I don't even know if there's a great brand awareness kind of measurement out of that either. But
Right.
that's so when companies come to you, Joe, do they kind of say, hey, our main objective is lead gen, second objective is brand awareness, and you measure in terms of that, and you give them this kind of a mixed report kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or what does that look like when companies come to you and kind of want to engage in your services?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because it's so relevant. I mean, it's extremely relevant. So yeah, I mean, there's like a pool of so many objectives that exhibitors can have, right? There's the brand awareness, brand sentiment, the ROI, thought leadership, just all of those different things. And obviously, where is that company? Are they a mature company? Are they a newer company? Are they a recently acquired company? So all of those different, variables play into setting the KPIs, based on objectives. So a lot of time we will work with companies, coach them, kind of understand, like, yeah, we know your objective is ROI at the end of the day, but let's take a step back because, how do you define ROI? You ask 10 people, how do you define ROI? You probably
Yeah.
get 10 answers. Um, but to your point, the brand awareness, brand sentiment, people feel like it's squishy, it's nebulous, it's hard to measure and quantify. And, through asking the right questions and understanding their goals and objectives, you can definitely quantify brand awareness. And to your point, like you said, exit surveys, pre-post surveys, all of those different ways of doing surveys is really the tried and true method of understanding to people. Did their visit enhance their experience with the brand, change their perception of the brand or their sentiment with the brand? And you marry that with like PR and social media monitoring and listening, and you can really get a much broader picture. So yeah, you understand exactly from like the visitor's point of view, but then you can also understand it from like the press or just like the holistic point of view, organic point of view when you go beyond just like an exit survey.
So I'm guessing that companies who use your services, like they don't just want to measure once. They typically do a number of shows using the same, measurement techniques, if you will, so that you can compare apples to apples in a sense?
Yeah, we have quite, it's interesting. It's a good question. We'd love everyone to measure their whole programs, of course, right? But um, yeah, in a perfect world. But sometimes it's like whether it's cost prohibitive, headcount resource prohibitive, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think a lot of the more strategic brands are measuring at least, consistently across their tier ones and their tier two events. Of course, we work with some huge companies that they just want to measure their one biggest show of the year. It's their senior prom. It's 80% of their budget, whatever the case may be. So it really varies. But the beauty, to your point, of those who are measuring a little bit more consistently, we not only then compare their results against Evolio's benchmarks, but then we can establish their own benchmarks over time as well. So it's like company A, here's how you're doing across 15, 20 shows.
Mhm.
And then you can start looking at the individual results compared to your 15 show portfolio or 50 show portfolio to see which events are scoring higher or lower than your norm, your benchmark. And then that starts making the decisions around, okay, is our results lower at this event? Is it a function of what we did or didn't do? Or is it a function of not being in the right show? And then you can start using this data to make more strategic decisions versus just focusing on the tactics.
Right, right. Now, can you share with us a story of a company who kind of said, "Hey, we want to measure," and they did, and all of a sudden now they've, there's some sort of twist or something they didn't realize,
Yeah.
and it changed, or they had to overhaul how they did shows. Is there an example that comes to mind of a
There's
company
many.
that? Yeah, okay. Well, share with us one, because I think that would be fascinating for the listeners to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was pretty awesome actually, and it was so impactful because it literally saved the company millions and millions of dollars. And they thought investing in the measurement was a big going to be a big like money suck, you know. And then what happened was they realized, oh my God, they got their ROI on that tenfold. So basically what happened was they had a portfolio of about 40 shows, and in their tier one, tier twos, they weren't even talking about the tier threes at this point. And they were going to these shows year after year because that's just we go year after year. And it just kind of became rinse and repeat versus like, why are we going to these shows?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we did this whole portfolio analysis, understanding the audience of the shows, their investment level, number of staff, what they're bringing to the shows. We did some surveys, of course, as well. And we identified that about seven of the shows, they were either overspending or they shouldn't be at anymore because whether those shows had shifted or their organization's goals, products, solutions had sort of shifted, and it just wasn't a good alignment anymore between what they do and what the show is about. So the fun part of it, and I say fun sarcastically, was we had to then go and present the results to the entire events team, executive team, etc. And some of the shows that we recommended not going to anymore, they were pretty upset about. They were like, no, we have to be at this show.
Yeah.
And as an independent third party, I was taking the punches because the events team didn't want to deal with it, rightfully so. Um, so, we didn't focus on the feeling side of it. We were going by data. And of course, feelings are important, but let's start with the hard facts and then talk about why you feel that you have to be at this show. And basically the outcome was that, okay, if you feel you need to be at the show, then you fund it. It wasn't coming out of corporate funding anymore. It was coming out of field marketing or individual business units. So it's like, if it's that important for you to be there, then you fund it. And it really shifted the way people were thinking about being at shows and how they're investing in shows at that company.
Yeah, I think there, like you're talking about emotions, and you're saying like data, right? And this was before we were recording. You're saying like, we have to be unemotional about it. Like, look, what is the data saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then, step back and then judge that accordingly. Now, as opposed to, I think people fall in love with a show that they do every year, or
Yeah.
it's just, or there's a tradition of like, that's our show, or this is what we do. And
Mm-hmm.
again, the events people, they want to have work, they want to do, whatever events they're doing. And
Yeah.
so there is, emotion caught up in that.
Yeah.
And I mean, asking those tough questions. I think back, RSA just happened a couple of weeks ago, big security show.
Mm-hmm.
Palo Alto pulled out of that show, and that used to be one of the bigger companies going to that show, but they just chose to redistribute that, budget across all these other shows that they could then dominate, right?
Yeah.
So there's some strategy there, and of course you need the data to be able to do that, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So how does storytelling, play a role in this? Because in the intro we talked about storytelling. You said you're not that creative of a guy, but I mean I think you are more than you let on. Uh, how do we kind of reconcile that world of data and storytelling and all of that? Is that kind of when you present your results, or tell us about that?
Yeah, I think to me, it's one of the most important aspects of measurement. Of course, understanding the objectives and setting the KPIs and asking the right questions and collecting the data the right way. Every step is important. But at the end of the day, if no one knows what to do with this information, it's all a waste. So the storytelling becomes critical. And, we look at storytelling as first by understanding what is storytelling, forgetting the data side of it yet. Storytelling has a beginning, middle, and end. There's a protagonist, there's an antagonist, like there's an end result to this story. You don't necessarily want to leave people hanging unless there's a part two, all of those things that go into just creating and telling a story. So we take that model, we say, okay, now let's use data and follow that same model. And, you know, it's easy. Anyone can look at a pie chart, a bar chart, a table of information and, make some assumptions, have a hypothesis of what it all means. And most of the time, you're probably going to be right about it. But it's the so what, the how does it impact my budget? How does it tie back to my objectives? And I think the bigger part of data storytelling too is it's that when you really dig into the data, like segmentation analysis and different like research techniques, max diff, not to geek out, but like, what's significant? Are men different than women? Are, Gen Z's different than boomers? And how so? How do they want to experience something? How do they want to be spoken with? How do they want to be heard? How do they want to be marketed to? So that's where like the data storytelling really comes in, is when you start slicing up the data to really say, not here's what it says, but here's what to do with it.
Yeah, that application is so critical because you just raw data, just dumped on their lap
Yeah.
doesn't really, inspire or do anything. Like they have to make sense of it. And you're the expert, right? You're the one who's seen this play out and in a better sense of what's happening.
For
So to
years.
kind of combine what we just talked about, and
Mhm.
also you mentioned Gen Z, boomers, generations. Joe, tell me, you've been in the business 30 years.
Mhm.
What have you seen evolve and change in terms of trends in the trade show booth, right? Like, you've been measuring this whole time.
Yeah.
What has been that arc of what's happening out there? I don't even know what to give you better context than that,
Right, right.
because I don't know what's happening. So what have you seen evolve over time?
I mean, both good and bad, I mean, mostly good, fortunately, right? That's why I think our industry is starting to really thrive again post-pandemic. But um, I think people are becoming more sophisticated, event marketers, because to your point earlier about like, yeah, we all kind of fall into this, right? Which most of us have. I think some of the younger generations, they're choosing to go into this, which is a whole different game, because now universities are starting to offer, event programs, things like that.
Bemidji, right? Bemidji in Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Right.
Yeah.
So I think people are becoming more sophisticated. Yeah, I think sometimes we're blinded by the new shiny object kind of thing. It's like, oh, let's do this in our booth. And half the time it's not really that effective, or people like it's not being promoted well, or staff saying,
Mhm.
hey, come check this out. So those are some of the misses. I
Yeah.
will say this, a lot of the industry, it's just like it's almost like, how do you build a better mousetrap? When the mousetrap works or works good enough, I kind of feel the same way about the event industry, like in exhibiting. Yeah, there's a lot of things we could do smarter, more strategically, cost savings, but for the most part, it's have a booth, your demos, have good staff, some interactive stuff, some attention getting, things. I mean, I think the model, the framework is what it is. It's how we do it, is what we need to focus on. And I think I've seen people doing it so much better over the last, decade or so, then the reboot of the pandemic, of course.
Mhm.
I think now as we come back, budgets are tighter, costs are higher. We have to be smarter. So, and I see
Yeah.
a lot of people being smarter.
Is there any sort of like myth or fallacy that data, well, something that people think works, but the data kind of proves that's not the case, but we continue to do it anyways? Is there something that comes to mind around that?
Yeah, I think what we talked about before, the whole badge scanning thing, it's like, some companies, some people, whatever, they think like, oh, scanning badges is a KPI. We had 20% more badge scans than last year, something like that. Badge scans are just badge scans. It's looking at your marketing qualified leads, your MQLs, your SQLs, your sales qualified leads. And I think we have to stop using these like rudimentary metrics like number of badge scans and calling them leads as a success metric, or like how busy your coffee bar was, or like in your booth. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
these are just not good metrics.
So
And
vanity metrics, really, Joe, right? Like it's like,
yeah,
hey, a busy booth. except the lineup to the coffee bars, mostly exhibitors,
Right.
looking for the morning cup of Joe.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the badge scan, I guess like for some companies, if you look at a nurture campaign, and I don't know how much that, like what kind of, conversion comes out of that, but that's how some companies look. And if you're new, any scans a new lead in a sense, right?
Hopefully,
You
yeah,
like,
some sort of
that
lead.
kind of green ground kind of thing, or net new leads. But yeah, definitely that transactional tit for tat at some of these big shows. It's just, you know, kind of it's kind of sad sometimes just what people, and we're comparing those well, we're trying to compare apples to apples, but it's not, right? Where
Yeah.
you have more of an experience that has maybe an educational component to it. They walk away knowing what you do and why you do it and all of that, and maybe have some feelings towards the company because of how
Yeah.
they put that off. We talk a lot about brand affinity as opposed to brand awareness, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of likability side of things, because
Hmm.
for some companies it's just like, hey, do you know our logo? Like
Right.
that's kind of just splash the logo everywhere.
Yeah.
Does that kind of fall into that a little bit too with your, when you look at brand awareness surveys, that what does the brand awareness really mean to these companies?
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah, like to your point, affinity, sentiment, a lot of the metrics that or a lot of the studies that we conduct include these types of, metrics around brand sentiment and affinity. And, people think, oh, I can't measure that. Oh, you absolutely can measure it. Like, give you an example. Again, going back to like an exit survey or even like a pre-post survey, whichever. But the point is like simple things like around message agreement, using a scale of, strongly disagree to strongly agree, whatever scale you want to use, that's the right scale. But, asking people how they perceive a brand or how they perceive those solutions or how they perceive that brand compared to competitors, things like that.
Mm.
And then, if you do like a pre-post or what we call unexposed exposed, measure people that have not yet been to the booth through screening, that measure people as they're exiting the booth, and then measure the change for those same exact metrics to understand, how they perceive that brand now as a result of their visit. And you want to talk about like justifying your investment in a show or like, should we be in the show, things like that.
Yeah.
That's like the number one way to do it because it's inarguable. It's not like, well, I feel like we did a good job. I feel like our logo was everywhere. It's like, no, we have statistics and data to say that the people that visit our booth are, plus 20 points more likely to want to buy or see us in a different light now, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we live in such a data driven world. It's sad that we have to go to those things where we go, it seemed like, or it felt like, right?
And it's still happening.
Right. Yeah.
It's
I
fair.
mean, that's the fight that you're fighting out there, Joe, really, right? Is kind of like, let's not judge things just by guessing, right? We
Yeah.
can measure this, right? Yeah. So if we look out into the future, Joe, and we kind of talked about like what you've seen over your career,
Mhm.
what do you see as trends in the future in terms of just how trade shows are evolving more so? You said like we're back, we're better, and for the most part, um, I'm guessing more data. I'm seeing. I mean, we were hanging out at Exhibitor Live. We were rating your
Yeah.
fast sensor. That we're a reseller of theirs as well. That
Yeah.
comes to mind because you have that like heat map, visitor dwell time, all of that kind of stuff, visitor journey.
Yeah.
Um, so embracing more data, is that what you're seeing, or I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, no, you're absolutely right. I think, we are now starting to actually drown in data. And we went from, I think, few years ago, having a very little data or very little actionable data, now to be almost drowning in data because data is so easy to capture now, so many different ways. To your point, like the lead scans, the behavioral tracking, survey data, registration data, facial recognition data. Like there's so much data out there. Kind of going back to the data storytelling. So what? Like, okay, now I have a lot of cute dashboards and I have a lot of data, but what is it telling me? What am I going to do with this information? And this is my favorite part of the day is what do we do with this information? I think the other thing is it's, going back to like the so what part. What are we going to do with this information now? I mean, people say to me all the time, "Oh my God, aren't you scared of AI being able to replace you?" I'm like, no, it's making my job a heck of a lot easier. Are you kidding me? It's bringing down our prices. It's helping us get greater profit margins. It's helping our clients be able to measure more, get them results quicker. So when you talk about like what's ahead of the curve, what's coming next, it's like leveraging AI to really help you analyze, understand the data. What does it mean? How does this impact my program? What can I do better, do different? You could do it yourself. You could use companies like anyone else, Fast Sense or EVOLIO, it doesn't matter. But the point is you still have to know how to capture data. You still need to set your KPIs and have your strategy. From my perspective, it's helping us to analyze data a little bit more efficiently. Is it replacing what we do? Absolutely not. It's just assisting us in what we do.
Yeah. And I think this makes me think a little bit of boost staff training. I always say that, it's probably the number one thing that would improve your results. And it's the last thing exhibitors ever spend money on, right? Like they like, here's my budget. They go to their booth builder. What can you do for this? And then that's it, right? Yeah. And so I feel like measurement is one of those things that should almost be set aside and is consistent across the board that, why do we go do it if we don't know how we did, right? Like, how do we know we're making the right choices? Right.
And well, when it comes to staffing, to your point, we literally use those like staff performance metrics every morning with most of our clients to motivate and inform their booth staff. Hey guys, 60% of your visitors interacted with you, the benchmark 70. Let's step it up today, guys. Hey, 95% of them rated you excellent or very good in terms of your helpfulness. Great job. Let's keep it up. And what we find is, by day 3 or day 4, if it's a longer show, when they're like losing their mojo, they love this information because it's now keeping them motivated, informed, inspired to keep going. Because to your point, you can have the most beautiful booth, but if your staff is sitting on their butts and looking at their phones and talking to each other and have their back to the aisle, it just crumbles right in front of your face, despite how beautiful your booth is.
Yeah, that's one of old blog post of mine was, is your booth pretty or is it pretty effective, right? Like, your people is a big part of that, right? So
love it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good stuff. I love, the fact that you have so much experience in this, area of trade show expertise, and that, you are able to just implement it for people. Because when I hear you talking about exit surveys and entrance surveys and screening and thinking about all the questions, like, you have to be so good at asking the right questions, right? I mean, that's a big part of surveys.
Yeah.
And like, to try to do that in-house, you're like, forget it, right? Like, using an expert is just one of these, it's a no-brainer, I think, in this case. So how can people reach out to you, Joe, if they were interested?
So super easy. You could go to evolio.co, not com, .co, EVOLIO.co, or evoliomarketing.com, which is super long. But anyway, Joe F at evolio.co, JOEF, as in Federbush, at evolio.co. Reach out anytime, anything I could do to help. That's what we're here for is, look, events are getting expensive. Validation, measurement, all this stuff is more important now than we think it's ever been. We're feeling that in a good way. But yeah, we have to get past those vanity metrics, to your point, those rudimentary metrics, and start. Everyone needs to be looking at data that they can use to justify what they're doing.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, and if you want to come meet Joe in person or me in person, come to an exhibitor live sometime, and we'll probably be doing some sessions, I'm sure. So
there you go.
Very good. Well, thanks, Joe, for your time. I appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Well, thank you for having me, and can't wait to see you at the next show.
Excellent. And to all of our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And until next time, you know what to do. Stay engaged.
Thank you so much for listening to Engaging Personalities. If you believe this world needs more engagement and you're an industry leader or you have an interesting take on rehumanizing business, go to go.engagify.ai/podcast-guest to apply and come on the show. If you got something out of this interview, do you mind sharing it on your social media? Just grab a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on the socials. If you know someone that would be a great guest, Tag them on social media to let them know about the show. Include the hashtag Engaging Personalities. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episode, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Go to our website, engagify.ai, or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening and stay engaged.